In a tense courtroom, a 16-year-old black boy faced a judge on a minor charge, his eyes locking onto hers with sudden recognition. When he uttered, "You're my mom," the room froze, gasps echoing as a buried past unraveled, reshaping lives in an instant. Elijah Monroe stood before Judge Adrian Wells in the juvenile courtroom of Macon, Georgia, his hands clasped tightly, his heart pounding. At 16, he was tall for his age, his frame lean, his eyes carrying a mix of defiance and fear. He'd been brought in on a shoplifting charge, allegedly stealing a pair of sneakers from a local store. It was a minor offense, but Elijah's life had been a series of minor offenses, each one piling up, each one pushing him closer to a system that didn't care about his story. Today, though, was different. Today, Elijah's past was about to collide with his present in a way no one could have predicted. Judge Adrian Wells, a 38-year-old black woman, presided over the juvenile court with a reputation for fairness, but firmness. She'd climbed the ranks through sheer determination. Law school at Howard, years as a public defender, then a prosecutor, and now a judge. Her courtroom was a place of order, where she balanced compassion with accountability. But beneath her composed exterior, Adrian carried a secret, one she'd buried long ago, one that had shaped her life as much as her career. The courtroom was busy that morning, the docket packed with juvenile cases, truancy, vandalism, petty theft. Elijah's case was routine, or so it seemed. His public defender, a young woman named Sarah Klein, stood beside him, her notes hastily prepared. The prosecutor, Michael Torres, a seasoned attorney with a no-nonsense approach, presented the state's case. Elijah had been caught on camera taking the sneakers, had no prior convictions, but had a history of warnings. Torres recommended probation and community service, a standard outcome for a first-time offense. Adrian listened, her pen moving across her notes, her eyes occasionally meeting Elijah's. There was something about him, a familiarity she couldn't place. His face, the way his eyes held hers, stirred a memory she couldn't grasp. She pushed it aside, focusing on the case. "Mr. Monroe," she said, her voice clear, "do you understand the charges against you?" Elijah nodded, his voice low. "Yes, ma'am." He shifted his weight, his hands fidgeting. Sarah leaned in, whispering something, but Elijah's attention was on Adrian. He stared at her, his brow furrowing, as if trying to solve a puzzle. The courtroom hummed with the usual sounds, papers shuffling, whispers from the gallery, but Elijah's focus was singular. Sarah spoke next, outlining Elijah's defense. He'd taken the sneakers, she admitted, but it was a mistake born of desperation. His foster family struggled financially, and Elijah, a good student despite his troubles, had wanted to replace his worn-out shoes before school started. "He's not a criminal, Your Honor," Sarah said. "He's a kid who made a bad choice. We request leniency." Adrian nodded, her gaze returning to Elijah. "Mr. Monroe, would you like to say anything before I rule?" she asked, her tone encouraging but professional. Elijah hesitated, his eyes searching her face. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "You're my mom." The words hit like a thunderclap. The courtroom fell silent, every head turning toward Elijah, then Adrian. The bailiff froze, his hand on his belt. Sarah's jaw dropped, her notes forgotten. Torres blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. The gallery, parents, social workers, a few reporters, gasped in unison, the sound rippling through the room. Adrienne's pen stopped mid-sentence, her breath catching. She stared at Elijah, her composure cracking for the first time in years. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice steady but strained. Elijah swallowed, his voice stronger now. "You're my mom. I know it's you." His eyes, wide and certain, locked onto hers. The room held its breath, waiting for what came next. Adrienne's mind raced. 22 years ago, at 16, she'd given birth to a boy. She'd been a scared teenager in Atlanta, her family struggling, her future uncertain. Unable to care for him, she'd made the agonizing decision to give him up for adoption, a closed process that left no trace. She'd moved on, built a life, but never forgot the son she'd lost. Could this be him? The resemblance, the eyes, the jawline, suddenly seemed undeniable. Mr. Monroe, she said, her voice careful, this is a serious matter. Can you explain why you believe this? She needed to maintain order, to keep the courtroom from spiraling, but her heart pounded. Elijah took a deep breath. I was adopted when I was a baby. My foster mom, she's not my real mom, but she's good to me. She told me my birth mom was young, black, from Atlanta. Said she wanted me to have a better life. I saw your name in the paper last year, about you becoming a judge. I looked you up. You're from Atlanta, born in '87. It fits. And he paused, his voice breaking. I just know. I can feel it. The gallery murmured, the weight of Elijah's words sinking in. Adrienne's hands trembled slightly, but she clasped them together, hiding her turmoil. She'd never expected this moment, never imagined her past would walk into her courtroom. But she couldn't let emotion cloud her duty. Mr. Monroe, she said, this court is here to address your charges, not personal matters. I'll hear your statement, but we'll proceed with the case. Sarah, recovering, jumped in. Your Honor, if I may, this is highly unusual. Perhaps a recess to verify. Adrienne raised a hand, silencing her. No recess, she said firmly. We'll address the charges first. Mr. Torres, anything further? Torres, thrown off by the exchange, shook his head. No, Your Honor. He sat, his eyes darting between Elijah and Adrienne, sensing a story bigger than the case. Adrienne took a breath, steadying herself. Mr. Monroe, your actions were wrong, but I take into account your circumstances and lack of prior record. I'm ordering 50 hours of community service and 6 months of probation. Do you understand? Elijah nodded, his eyes still on her, searching for something beyond the ruling. The gavel fell, but the room didn't move. Adrienne addressed the court. We'll take a 10-minute recess. Mr. Monroe, I'd like to speak with you and your counsel in my chambers. The bailiff nodded, guiding Elijah and Sarah toward the side door. The gallery buzzed, reporters scribbling furiously, already drafting headlines. In chambers, Adrienne sat across from Elijah and Sarah, her robe still on, her authority intact but her heart exposed. Elijah, she said, her voice softer now, tell me everything you know about your adoption. Elijah recounted what his foster mother, Carla, had shared, a young mother, a closed adoption through a Georgia agency, no contact since. He'd pieced together Adrienne's identity through news articles and public records, a hunch that grew into certainty when he saw her photo. Adrienne listened, her mind flashing back to that hospital room in Atlanta, the baby she'd held for just a moment before letting go. She'd never known his fate, never allowed herself to search, fearing the pain. Now here he was, a teenager with her eyes, her resolve. I'll need to verify this, she said, her voice steady but gentle. If you're willing, we can arrange a DNA test. Elijah nodded, his voice quiet. I'd like that. Sarah, sensing the weight of the moment, offered to coordinate with social services. Adrienne thanked her, then turned to Elijah. Regardless of what we find, you did well today. You owned your mistake. That matters. Elijah smiled, a small, hopeful thing. Thank you, Judge. He didn't say Mom again, but the word hung between them, unspoken but felt. The DNA test, arranged discreetly, confirmed it 3 weeks later. Elijah was Adrienne's son. She recused herself from his case to avoid conflict, and a new judge oversaw his probation. Adrienne and Elijah began meeting, first with Carla present, then alone, building a fragile but growing bond. Adrienne shared her story, her struggles, her rise, her regrets. Elijah shared his foster homes, school, the sneakers he'd stolen to fit in. The story spread through Macon, fueled by courtroom whispers and media coverage. Adrienne faced scrutiny, some praising her integrity, others questioning her impartiality. She weathered it, focusing on Elijah. He stayed in school, his grades improving, his community service completed early. Adrienne mentored him, guiding him toward college, maybe law school. For Elijah, finding his mother was a lifeline, a chance to rewrite his future. For Adrian, it was redemption, a piece of her past reclaimed. The courtroom gasp had faded, but its echo lingered, a moment when truth broke through, binding a mother and son against all odds.